Men do not understand themselves, yet they dare to claim they understand women. These words were never written by Plato, but if you study his work with ruthless honesty, you will see this truth oozing through every layer of his philosophy. You see, Plato didn't write dating advice. He didn't teach men how to win women. Plato dealt with the deeper disease, the blindness of man to the forces that govern his own mind. Because long before men learned to chase beauty, long before they bowed to the soft whispers of the feminine, Plato had already diagnosed the real problem. The mind of man, when untrained, becomes the perfect playground for deception. You may remember the allegory of the cave from the Republic, the famous story of prisoners chained in darkness, staring at shadows cast on the wall. They believe the shadows are real. They worship the illusions. They build their entire existence on lies projected by others. But what Plato doesn't say directly, what most never dare to see, is that those shadows were not just political or social manipulations. No, my friend. One of the most powerful shadows cast on the mind of man is woman herself. Not woman in her purest nature, but woman as an idea, an illusion. A projection designed to keep men distracted, compliant, emotionally enslaved. Let me explain. Plato warns us that the masses will never believe the truth when it shines. They will fight to defend their illusions. And no illusion is more intoxicating than the idea that women are innocent, pure, and incapable of manipulation. This is the grand theater where men lose themselves. A woman smiles, and the untrained man calls it love. She cries, and he calls it sincerity. She touches his hand, and he calls it destiny. But Plato would laugh, because to Plato, this is the behavior of a prisoner who refuses to turn his head toward the light. He lives in shadows and calls them reality. You see, Plato argued that true knowledge begins when you recognize you know nothing. The beginning of wisdom is the definition of terms, he wrote. But how many men define woman based on what she shows rather than what she is? How many men investigate the nature of feminine influence as rigorously as they study business, politics, or warfare? None. And that is precisely why women dominate the emotional landscape of men without lifting a finger. The woman doesn't have to plot against you. She doesn't have to conspire like some evil genius. No, she simply exists as a mirror to your ignorance. She reflects the weakness you refuse to confront in yourself. Plato said it best. The worst of all deceptions is self-deception. Men deceive themselves into believing they are rational in love, but they are not. They are prisoners. And the chains are not on their wrists, they are wrapped around their minds. And here lies Plato's brutal truth. Woman does not manipulate you, your illusions about her do. It is the idea of woman, the false goddess you have built in your mind, that keeps you enslaved. She smiles, and you collapse. She withdraws, and you chase. You give her power, and call it devotion. But Plato warned you, those who live by the shadows will never understand reality when it finally burns their eyes. And so, here you sit, believing that your heart is pure, your intentions are noble, and your love is righteous. But if you could stand outside yourself, if you could become the philosopher, as Plato commands, you would see a man who has mistaken chains for wings, illusion for truth, and manipulation for love. Plato never romanticized the human condition. In fact, in Phaedrus, he writes that the soul is like a chariot pulled by two horses, one noble, one wild. The noble horse seeks reason, truth, discipline. But the wild horse, it craves pleasure, beauty, and temptation. And the man, the driver, is constantly at war, trying to control these beasts. Here is where most men fail. You see, every time a woman enters the scene, the wild horse in your soul snaps its reins. It pulls you toward her laughter, her scent, her curves, her attention. And you, the driver, weak and untrained, let it drag you like a fool to your own ruin. You don't question the horse. You don't resist its pull. You call this madness falling in love, when in truth, Plato saw it as spiritual slavery. In the Symposium, Plato describes love not as mutual happiness, but as a madness sent by the gods. A madness that blinds men, consumes them, and makes them worship the image of beauty while forgetting the essence of what is real. He calls it a divine madness, yes, but it is still madness. And unless you master it, you are nothing but a pawn, a slave to fleeting pleasures, a worshipper of shadows. And here's the brutal twist. Women know this. Whether consciously or instinctively, they understand that men are ruled by this madness. They understand the power they hold over a man who has not disciplined his soul. She doesn't need to be malicious to destroy you. She only needs to exist in your mind as the prize. You turn her into your purpose, your meaning, your reward. And once you do that, you no longer see her as she is. You see her as you wish her to be. And this, my friend, is the perfect recipe for manipulation. Do you know what Plato feared more than war? The corruption of the soul. He warned that men who cannot govern themselves will be governed by others, by tyrants, by sophists, by flatterers. And who is a greater flatterer than a woman who knows you crave her validation? She becomes the puppeteer, and you, the eager puppet, dancing for her attention, sacrificing your dignity, your purpose, your mission. You think she is the one playing the game, but the game began long before she entered your life. The real game is the war within you, the battle between your higher self and your base desires. And every time you choose pleasure over principle, fantasy over reality, she doesn't need to defeat you. You defeat yourself. Plato wrote that the just man does not permit the lustful part of his soul to dominate him. Yet here you are, negotiating with your emotions like a coward, hoping she will choose you, validate you, complete you. This is the mark of a man who has left the cave only to build another one, this time with golden bars and velvet chains. Let me ask you this. When was the last time you truly questioned why you chase women? When was the last time you asked yourself if she is leading you closer to truth or dragging you deeper into illusion? Most men never ask. Because asking demands courage. It demands you admit that you've been wrong, that you've been fooled, that the stories you tell yourself about love, devotion, and destiny are nothing but smoke and mirrors. And until you face that reality, until you stand, like the philosopher, and look directly into the light of truth, you will remain a slave not to women, but to the idea of women that you refuse to question. Plato understood that society is built on narratives, on myths designed to keep people obedient to the system. And nowhere is this more evident than in the narrative men have been fed about women. You've been told they are your better half. You've been told they complete you. You've been told they hold the keys to your happiness. But Plato knew better. In the Republic he makes it clear, the masses must be ruled by those who have seen the truth. Yet the tragedy is, most men never become rulers of their own minds. Let me reveal to you the real structure of the game. Plato saw the human soul as divided into three parts: reason, spirit, and appetite. Reason seeks wisdom and truth. Spirit seeks honor and recognition. Appetite seeks pleasure and comfort. Most men, when it comes to women, live entirely in the appetite. She smiles. You feel pleasure. She gives you attention. You feel validated. She touches your body. You feel alive. But this is the lowest part of your being. The part Plato warned must be ruled by reason, or it will drag you into ruin. And this is why women have such terrifying influence over weak men. She doesn't need to challenge your mind. She doesn't need to respect your mission. All she needs to do is feed your appetite, and you will sell your soul for another taste. Like a man lost in the desert, you will crawl on your knees, begging for drops of validation, while she stands over you, holding the water you once had the power to create for yourself. You think I exaggerate? Look around. Men betray their families for a stranger's touch. Men destroy their empires for the approval of a woman who doesn't respect them. Men kill themselves because she left. What greater proof do you need that you are ruled by the lowest part of yourself? And here is Plato's greatest warning, hidden in plain sight. No man is free who is not master of himself. If you have not mastered your appetites, your cravings, your desire for validation, you are not free. It does not matter how much money you have, how many followers you gain, or how many women you attract. If they can break you with a glance, you are still a prisoner. But there is more. In the Laws, Plato argued that the downfall of a city begins when men allow pleasure to rule over discipline. And what is society today, if not a graveyard of men who have sacrificed their strength on the altar of feminine approval? You see it in politics, you see it in religion, you see it in culture. Men bowing, apologizing, submitting, not to truth, not to principle, but to the fear of losing her. Plato never taught men to hate women. He taught men to see clearly. The woman is not your enemy. She is a reflection of your ungoverned soul. She plays the game because you invited her to the table, blind, desperate, unprepared. But you can flip the board. You can rise from the cave. You can reclaim the throne of your mind, but only if you dare to face what most men fear the most, the truth about themselves. Let me tell you something Plato hinted at, but the modern world refuses to accept. Women test men for one reason only, to reveal weakness that already lives in him. She is not the cause of your collapse. She is the mirror showing you who you truly are when your ego is stripped bare. Plato, in Gorgias, makes it devastatingly clear when he says, "It is better to suffer injustice than to commit it." Why? Because the man who commits injustice proves he has no mastery over his desires, and here is the irony most men never understand. When you chase a woman, compromise your values, betray your mission, and beg for her validation, you are committing injustice against your own soul. You think you're serving love. You think you're fighting for her. But in reality, you are violating yourself. Plato taught that the greatest harmony a man can achieve is to rule himself with reason, to align his actions with truth, not temptation. And yet, look at how society programs you to betray this law. You're told to fight for her, to never give up on love, to prove you're a real man by sacrificing everything for her approval. But Plato warned about this exact manipulation. In the Republic, he calls it the rule of the many by the persuasive flatterers. And who flatters your delusions better than a woman who feeds your ego while you surrender your mind? You see, women have learned, consciously or not, that a man addicted to validation will always be easy to control. She doesn't need to use logic. She doesn't need to defeat you in argument. She only needs to look you in the eye and make you feel like a king, and you'll do the rest. You'll destroy yourself for her attention, thinking you're chasing love when you're actually chasing your own emotional slavery. Plato didn't just talk about the individual man. He warned about civilizations collapsing when men surrender discipline for pleasure. He saw this pattern in the fall of Athens. He watched leaders compromise principles to please the masses, just as modern men compromise their souls to please women. The sickness is the same. The disease of the untrained soul always ends the same way, collapse. But Plato also gave the cure. He taught that the highest purpose of a man is to pursue the good, to climb out of the cave, to face the light even if it blinds you, even if it burns away everything you thought was real. And here is what most men will never do. They will never dare to see the woman not as a goddess, not as a curse, but as a mirror showing them their undisciplined appetites, their fragile egos, their desperate need to be seen. Do you have the courage to face that reflection? Do you have the strength to stand, not as a beggar, not as a slave, but as a man who governs himself first? Because until you do, you will always be played. You will always fall for the game, because you refuse to master the player within you. And when you finally see this, when you finally stand in the light Plato spoke of, you will never look at women the same way again. Most men live in terror of losing a woman's favor, but Plato teaches you to fear something far worse, the loss of your own soul. He writes in Phaedo, the soul takes on the character of the actions it pursues. In other words, if you spend your life chasing validation, your soul becomes weak. If you make her attention your highest pursuit, your soul shrinks into something petty, something small, something unworthy of greatness. Let me make this even more brutal. Every time you bend your values to keep her, every time you silence your truth to please her, every time you sacrifice your mission for her emotions, you are not loving her, you are betraying yourself. And Plato makes it clear, betrayal of the self is the root of all injustice. Why do you think tyrants rise? Why do you think civilizations fall? Because men refuse to govern themselves. Because men would rather serve pleasure than truth. Because men would rather chase shadows than face the light. And women, consciously or not, test men to expose this exact weakness. She pushes your boundaries to see if you'll hold the line. She withholds affection to see if you'll beg. She challenges your convictions to see if you'll betray them just to keep her around. And every time you fold, she loses respect for you. Because deep down, she knows a man who cannot rule himself, cannot rule anything. Not his life, not his future, not his legacy. Plato described the perfect ruler as a philosopher king, a man who has mastered his soul, a man who seeks truth above all, a man who is unshaken by the games of the masses. If you can look into her eyes and see not a goddess, not an enemy, but a mirror, if you can take back your power, not with hate, not with bitterness, but with clarity, you become what Plato called the just man, the ruler of himself. And the man who rules himself cannot be manipulated, cannot be destroyed, cannot be played. So here's my challenge to you. Stop chasing the shadow. Stop worshipping the illusion. Stop trading your soul for temporary affection. Stand up, look in the mirror, face the parts of yourself you've been too afraid to confront. And when you do, you will never again fear the games women play, because you will have outgrown the need to play at all. If this message lit a fire in your soul, if it shook you awake in ways you didn't expect, don't let it end here. Take a moment right now to like this video, share it with a man who needs to hear it, and subscribe to this channel. We are building a brotherhood of men who refuse to live in the shadows, men who dare to rule their minds, their lives, and their destiny. Support us by following the link in the description. Join us on this journey toward truth, mastery, and freedom. Because the world doesn't need more men chasing illusions. It needs more men who have the courage to see